On June 19th of 2026, Chiron will move into the sign of Taurus for the first time since 1977, bringing with it new wounds, new vulnerabilities, new insecurities, and new opportunities for healing in a completely different area of our lives. For over 8 full years, Chiron has been moving through the sign of Aries, which is the longest Chiron moves through any zodiac sign. And during this time, the collective wound around Chiron has been much more personal. In the sign of Aries, Chiron's trademark vulnerability has been centered around identity, courage, ambition, and the right to exist as you are. As Chiron enters Taurus, there is a shift from a wounding of our personal identity to a wounding that involves material ownership. And the healing brought on by Chiron moves from the self to what the self needs, wants, and has on a very tangible level. And to be clear, this is not primarily a self-worth situation. The deepest wounds here are economic, material, physical, and environmental. There is a wound around what we value in a very real, physical, material way. And this can include food, land, money, our bodies, and our relationship to the earth itself. And Chiron is here in Taurus to expose that. In Aries, Chiron's dispositor was Mars, meaning that the ruler of the sign hosting Chiron was Mars, which is a traditional malefic planet. Chiron's wound here was sharp, aggressive, impulsive, and willful. It was essentially a wound around our ability to take action. In Taurus, Chiron's dispositor is Venus, a traditional benefic planet that brings positive energy, opportunities, and melds things together in a very harmonious way. This is a big shift in the way Chiron operates. The path to healing under this influence works through a more Venusian type of medicine, one that embodies beauty, pleasure, receptivity, and relationship above all else. But before we move on to the details, we need to start by understanding what Chiron actually is, because it's a very different situation than most of the traditional planets that we talk about here on my channel, and also what it means astrologically on both a personal and collective level. But before we do that, make sure you like this video, hit that subscribe button so you never miss an important astrology update, and share this video with a friend who you know is going to be super interested in what Chiron in Taurus is going to be bringing them for the next 7 years of their life. Also, if you're watching this video in the first 7 days since it's been released, make sure you hype it because that really helps us in the algorithms, and comment below and let us know your biggest takeaway from this video. Finally, if you're listening to the audio version on the podcast, make sure you give us a 5-star rating and review on whatever platform you're listening. That helps us more than you know. And also, I know that some of you would be super disappointed if you missed out on the 50% off sale that I'm having for our Chiron's Key workshop. This is going on for the entire month of June 2026. So if you're watching this video in June, head on down to the description in the details below and click the link, and you're going to get 50% off our already super valuable, super low price workshop that walks you through everything you need to know about what Chiron is, its history, its mythology, how it functions in astrology in a very deep level, but also in a very practical way. We also incorporate medical astrology information into this workshop. We'll teach you how to work through your personal Chiron placement, as well as the Chiron placements of all of your friends, family, and clients, including sign placement, house placement, planetary aspects, and more. We'll walk you through your personal Chiron story and how to understand it. We'll take you through your key Chiron moment, which is a very special technique that was taught to me by one of my teachers that I share with you in this workshop, and so much more. If you want to understand everything you need to know, not just about your personal Chiron placement, but transits of Chiron and your Chiron cycle, this workshop is for you. It's only $29 if you enroll in June. And even if you're watching this video way later on down the line, I'm still going to drop a special coupon code for you for a little less of a discount, but still a discount. So make sure you check that out again at the link in the description below. So let's begin with a little bit of background information on Chiron and what it actually is astronomically, because some of this actually informs its significations astrologically, which is kind of fascinating. Chiron was officially discovered on November 1st of 1977, and this occurred the last time Chiron was in Taurus. And so that means we're coming up on the Chiron return of Chiron's discovery, which is super fascinating, and I do think has some extra significance for this Chiron in Taurus transit that we'll discuss a little bit later on in this video. Also, if you don't know what the heck a Chiron return is, don't worry, we're going to cover that too, and what it means for you, especially if you're within a certain age group that's going to be having this Chiron return moment. while Chiron is in Taurus for the next 7-ish years. And so Chiron is unusual in a couple of different ways. The first way is that astronomers can't seem to decide exactly what the heck Chiron actually is. It's been classified as a dwarf planet. It's been classified as an asteroid. It has a tail like a comet. We don't know what the heck it is. And even when you look it up, you're going to get conflicting information sometimes. But for the purpose of using this in astrology, we look at it as being one of the asteroids, one of the centaurs. And so it's not a planet. It's not the same significance as a planet. And because it's newly discovered in 1977, we actually don't have the full scope, the full spectrum of information about what Chiron actually is, what it means, and what it does in our birth charts and in our lives just yet. Think about it. The traditional planets, Sun, Moon, Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, Saturn, these all have thousands of years of depth of understanding, of research, of experiential knowledge, working with it in astrology, whereas the modern planets don't have nearly as much time. And Chiron in particular has a very short window, being discovered in 1977, although astrologers really did jump on top of the Chiron situation pretty quickly, and Chiron does seem to have a more impactful influence than a lot of the other minor little asteroids and bits and bobs that people like to scatter throughout their charts nowadays. Chiron has some history, it has some roots, and it definitely has some very specific meanings that through my experience, through my work in astrology and medical astrology, really does pack a punch. And so we're going to talk about all of that in just a second. But the main point I'm trying to get across here is that Chiron never fully fit into any sort of category. And that also aligns with the mythology of Chiron, the actual centaur in Greek mythology, where he was sort of this child that was born half human, half horse. In a lot of the mythology, he actually has like the top of a horse and then the body of a human. Sometimes he has like human legs and then like a horse body. He's not like a normal looking centaur. So even with the centaurs, he doesn't fit in well. His mother did not want to birth a centaur. She is not a centaur. And so he never quite fit in any one place. And it's interesting that this particular body and space doesn't quite fit in any one place. I'm not sure if that had to do with their naming of this asteroid, comet, planetoid, whatever it is. But it is interesting that there is that association, and even if they didn't do it intentionally, everything is connected, and so these things are not an accident. The other thing about Chiron that makes it highly unique is that it has this very strange, bizarre, elliptical orbit that's very irregular. It's kind of all over the place, bouncing between Saturn, Uranus, sometimes it goes as far out as Neptune, sometimes it goes as close to us as Jupiter. It's really all over the place, and it spends very disproportionate amounts of time in each of the zodiac signs. It can go through a zodiac sign for anywhere from 2 years to 8.4 years. And we just ended that 8.4 year longest transit of Chiron through the sign of Aries, and we're moving into Taurus, where it'll be for the next 7 years. Chiron's shortest transit is when it moves through the sign of Virgo, which lasts only 1.61 years. And we won't be seeing this super short transit of Virgo in the future until 2043. And in the meantime, Chiron in Taurus is the energy that we're going to be working with, and that's going to last all the way through until May 5th of 2034. And because Chiron makes things a little uncomfortable and it requires our active participation in our own healing, we really need to understand what the heck is going on here for these next 7 years. As Chiron rolls through any new area of our chart, it brings up old wounds. It brings up old traumas, insecurities, vulnerabilities from the past that have been left unhealed. It can also add new wounds, new insecurities, new awkwardness to a completely fresh area of our lives that we're going to have to work through, we're going to have to work on and deal with. It exposes an area where we feel ashamed of who we are, we feel like we're not enough or not good enough, we feel incomplete in some way. It shows us where we feel the most vulnerable in this area where Chiron is transiting. It shows us where we feel uncomfortable in our own skin and we might not show up fully as ourselves. It also shows us where we require extra care, extra healing. And this can be on a mental level, this could be on an emotional level, this could be on a spiritual spiritual level, but sometimes it can also be in a very physical way, especially when Chiron, the wounded healer, is transiting through the sign of Taurus, which is very earthly. It is a fixed earth sign. It is grounded, it is material, it's connected to the earth itself, it's connected to our bodies, it's connected to our resources and our material possessions and our sensory experience. And all of those things are up for this wounding, this discomfort, this awkwardness, this vulnerability, this shame that is deeply connected to Chiron. Chiron can make us feel like we are aliens in our own skin. We are strangers in this area of our lives. We do not quite fit in, just like Chiron, as this weird comet, asteroid, dwarf planet, whatever the heck it is, does not quite fit in astronomically. And just like Chiron in the mythology does not quite fit in anywhere because he's not one specific thing. And so we feel like we don't fit the mold in this area of life, or if we did feel like we fit the mold in this area of life, when Chiron comes through, we start to realize that we don't quite fit, that there's no such thing as normal. And that can make us feel very uncomfortable and very exposed. And the wounds that Chiron brings up are often chronic. They are never fully healed. And while with most asteroids, you cannot just take the mythology, the symbolism from whatever the heck it was named after and just slop it onto that body in the sky and use it as a reference point for your interpretation. When it comes to Chiron, it does really fit quite well. And I do think that there is, the law of correspondence, everything is for a reason. And to a certain extent, things are named the way that they are because of that connection. It doesn't always work in this clean, cut and dry way. But for Chiron in particular, he was a centaur who was a healer. He was very refined. He was very philosophical. He was a teacher. And he was not able to heal himself when he was shot with a poison arrow. And so he begged for mercy. He begged the gods for mortality so he could go and die because he was in so much pain and he was ashamed and embarrassed that he couldn't heal himself. And they granted him that. And so what this kind of shows us in our own lives is an area where there is a wound and we feel like we should be able to take care of it. We should be able to heal ourselves because we've been there, done that, we've known so much, we do so much, but we can't quite do it. And there's always that lingering shame, that lingering vulnerability, like I am not good enough and I should be able to do this, but I can't. It's also something that we have to learn to live with and to heal through, but it never fully goes away. It's also something that we are uniquely able to help other people with, even though we can't always help ourselves in that same way. And I've seen this with the charts of so many like healers and people who work in alternative medicine, especially. Alternative medicine is connected to Chiron specifically. Alternative meaning traditional. So back in the day, it was just connected to medicine. But I show a lot of these examples in my Chiron's Key workshop because these are ways in which people have these wounds that they can't heal fully, that they have to keep dealing with and coming back to. It's like that healer, heal thyself energy, but because they can never fully heal themselves, they are constantly searching. They are constantly digging deeper. They are constantly learning more. And they have such depth of knowledge and experience because they haven't just been there, done there, gone through it. They are always still going through it and they're always still going deeper. That they are able to help guide so many other people on this path and even to help people finally find healing, not just physically, but in any way that this is impacting you, which a lot of it is psychological, a lot of it is non-physical, maybe not so much in Taurus, but in some of the other signs. And so it's just fascinating the way Chiron shows up in this very symbolic but very literal way in people's lives. And the transit of Chiron can do a very similar thing, but on a smaller scale. And so it exposes these wounds, it exposes these areas of discomfort, but we're never fully able to get rid of it. It's kind of like this chronic area of discomfort that we've ignored and we weren't maybe even fully aware of, or it's something new that comes up that maybe always lingers in our psyche in one way or another. and doesn't fully go away. So that said, those are all of the things about Chiron that are not so pleasant, but there are a lot of things about Chiron that are very pleasant. And so like I mentioned before, this can show you where you are coming into your own as a healer. The transit of Chiron might just show you where you are able to guide other people, to show them the way. And Chiron in mythology was a renowned teacher, and this does carry through astrologically. Prominent Chiron placements can bring really incredible teachers and healers. And when it comes to the Chiron transit, this could show up as you finding a guide, finding a teacher, finding someone who can show you the way, or it can show up as you coming into your own as a guide for other people, as a teacher, using your own wisdom, because Chiron brings this depth of experience that can only come through living through the difficult moments, working through the wounds, the traumas, the vulnerabilities, the insecurities in your own personal life. And because Chiron is a little bit different, he doesn't quite fit in anywhere, and this asteroid doesn't quite fit in anywhere, it shows you where you need to march to the beat of a different drummer. You need to do things in a very alternative, outside of the box, different way than what other people are doing. So Chiron can also be about confronting limitations that are imposed by societal norms and breaking through those norms in some way. Now, with Chiron moving into the sign of Taurus from June 19th of 2026 all the way through to May 5th of 2034, the wounds that will be dredged up, the awkwardness, the feeling that we are incomplete or not enough, is going to be centered around material possessions and our material tangible world. This could bring about some sort of economic or financial wounding on a very physical level and even on a collective level. In fact, there is some historical precedent for this. During the last transit of Chiron through the sign of Taurus between 1977 and 1984, we experienced a recession here in the United States and in other parts of the world. During this time, interest rates skyrocketed, the Iranian Revolution sent oil prices through the roof, and unemployment rates reached 11% here in the United States. Now, given where we're at as I'm recording this in June of 2026, some of this might sound eerily familiar, and it could be that history might repeat itself in a different way. Between Chiron transiting Taurus and some of the other astrological influences that we're going to be experiencing in the next few years, I wouldn't be surprised if we had a little bit more economic disruption, if there might be a recession. I'm not making this as a concrete prediction. I'm not a mundane astrologer by trade, but history does tend to repeat itself in these cycles, and so I'll be interested to see what comes up. And on a personal level, this is a time for all of us to look at our financial and economic wounds. This is a time for us to all reflect on how our material possessions influence how we feel about ourselves. When we don't have the same fancy car as our neighbor, do we feel like we're not enough? When we don't have the thing that that influencer on Instagram has, do we feel like we're not enough? When we don't feel beautiful, when we don't feel our best, when we don't have the latest and greatest, do we feel like we are not enough? Are we consumed by consumerism, or are we able to value what truly matters? Are we able to be grateful for what we have here and now, or do we strive for more? What does this look like? This could also be very literal material vulnerability. This could be us having to take a look at our financial situation, our budget, our savings, our resources, and feeling again this vulnerability, this insecurity. This is the perfect time to not just take stock of physically what we have or don't have and how that contributes to how we feel about ourselves, how other people see us, how we engage in our life, but it's also a time to look at our mental state around our financial situation. This is a time to look at what we value on a material level truly and deeply. This is a time to look at whether or not past traumas, our early life experience, our parents' viewpoints are dictating the way that we feel about our financial situation. This is a time to look at our money mindset and our wounding, our guilt, our shame, of vulnerability and insecurity around finances and around maybe even building wealth and having wealth. Is there a blockage there? Is there something that makes you feel insecure about having a nice car, about having enough money to pay your bills, about being able to go out to that nice restaurant, about being able to afford something that maybe your neighbor can't? Is there something that's holding you back from giving and actually providing resources for other people if you do have more than enough and you're able to share? Is there that internal sense of scarcity, a scarcity mindset, a feeling that you need to hold on to things that maybe you don't need to hold on to on a material level? And is that preventing you from really being as generous as you can be? Is that preventing you from living your life fully and maybe utilizing your resources in a way that feels pleasurable, in really engaging in the full sensory experience and what finances can actually do for you? What does that all look like? That's going to be something that's coming up for a lot of people, partly because I think that it has to. I think the external circumstances are going to be making people think a little bit harder about what they actually value when it comes to their purchases, their finances, the things that they acquire and maintain and have. And it's also going to have people looking and thinking a little bit more about how they can help other people in a very tangible, material way. But it's also going to be a time of looking at, like, hey, do I actually enjoy my wealth, my resources, the abundance that I might actually have, if you are lucky enough that that's applicable to you? And going back to the collective influence of Chiron in Taurus, we also have to look at this period between 1926 and 1934, which was the time that Chiron was in Taurus before it was discovered in 1977. And so all of you probably know right away what happened during that time period. We had the stock market crash of 1929, the Great Depression, and the Dust Bowl, which kind of leads us into the next factor, which is going to be food and food security. And so we have another marker, another milestone of economic instability. However, I don't believe that this time around it's going to be exactly the same as that, because we had so many other astrological influences that contributed to the circumstances that created the Great Depression. It's just kind of like in medical astrology. When I'm looking at somebody's chart, I'm looking for a combination of different patterns that work together to contribute to a pattern of symptoms. It's never just one thing in isolation that creates the circumstances that manifest as the physical thing in your life. And that's the same for the more generic, more mundane astrological configurations. Nothing is existing in a vacuum. And so I don't want you to believe or to get in your head that we're going to have another Great Depression. I do think this is going to be a time of economic instability. It already is, but it's not the exact same as that. However, we also had during this time the Dust Bowl. We also had food scarcity and food insecurity. And I do think that that's going to come back around this time around. Chiron is our wounds, vulnerabilities, and insecurities. And on a collective level, it is the wounds of the earth, the environment, the land itself, and our ability to produce food. Right now, we're experiencing record drought in the American West. And this is not isolated to this location. There is strange weather going on everywhere. Water is becoming a bigger issue, and food security is becoming a bigger issue too, because farmers are having a hard time dealing with this instability in weather patterns. I think that that might continue, but I also think that there are going to be other factors at play here that could create difficulty with food production, with supply chain issues involving food, because a lot of people are relying on food and resources that come from places that are nowhere near where they live, and sometimes from other countries. I think that that's going to come up as a bigger issue. I think during this time with Chiron and Taurus, we're going to be looking at how we can heal the land, heal the soil, regenerate what we've depleted, and create a better system for food stability moving forward as a result of these wounds that are going to be coming up because they're festering. And so I think that's going to be a big theme. And if I were to make a concrete mundane astrology prediction around Chiron and Taurus, that would be it. The other thing that this could bring up on a personal level is our relationship with food in our day-to-day lives. It's not just that certain areas, certain communities might have increased prices of food, or there could be certain things that are less available, or we could be dealing collectively with how to grow food in whatever times that we're in and whatever's going on during these times. It could also be looking at literally our one-to-one relationship with food. There could be some guilt, some shame, some vulnerability, some insecurity around our diet, around our relationship with what we put into our bodies that we're going to have to reflect and look at. It's going to be more about healing through that and looking at food as something sacred, food as medicine, food as something that nourishes our bodies, and it's not just there for pleasure. It could also be feeling guilt around enjoying food if somebody is, maybe more restrictive in their diet. And that could be something that you're looking at as well. So food related issues On a personal level, nutritional and health issues on a personal level could come up around food, but also body and body image connected to food. Back in the period of 1977 to 1978, the last time Chiron was in the sign of Taurus, there was an epidemic of eating disorders. That was the first time that eating disorders became such a big thing. And that was the first time that eating disorders were classified in the DSM. And the DSM is the manual that establishes all of the diagnostic criteria for all mental health disorders. Now, this was back in the 1980s, where we had a very different societal lens and also a very different medical landscape around issues pertaining to obesity and weight and body image. Nowadays, as we move into Chiron and Taurus, what is floating around everywhere? Ozempic, right? We have injectables that cause people to lose massive amounts of weight in a very short amount of time. I really believe that this is going to lead to a new diagnosis, a new classification of eating disorders that is centered around actual medical interventions that maybe are not needed for some people involving, weight loss. So I think this whole issue with pharmaceuticals and weight loss that is starting to become more prevalent, especially when people are looking at celebrities and kind of their faces and their bodies and what they're looking like, which for some are a little bit scary. I think this is going to become way more prevalent, and I think this is going to expose a new collective wound around our issues with food and eating and bodies and body image. Now let's move on to the final area of wounding that I want to discuss when it comes to the collective energy, the mundane astrology, and how Chiron and Taurus is going to impact us all. And that is the wound on planet Earth, the wound of our environment. This is a time where I believe we are going to see unprecedented environmental degradation. We're going to see unprecedented environmental issues and disasters, because this is what happened the last time around and the time before that. We've already begun to discuss how 2 cycles ago, during that Chiron and Taurus transit between 1926 and 1934, we saw the start of the Dust Bowl, which impacted the American prairie states hugely. And this was a massive environmental disaster that was brought about by poor farming practices. This was a human wounding to the earth that impacted our food supply, but also impacted the earth itself, quality of life. There were huge dust storms sweeping the American prairies during this time. And 1977 through 1984 was not any better. In fact, I would say it was historically much worse. This was a time of huge environmental disasters in the United States that led to massive changes in policy. And all of these disasters were 100% toxic and man-made. And this was kicked off by the Bridgeport chemical fire in New Jersey in 1977, where a chemical plant caught fire and released a toxic cloud over the state of New Jersey. This was quickly followed by the Love Canal toxic waste crisis in 1978. This particular environmental disaster occurred in New York State, where toxic chemicals were being leached by barrels that were improperly disposed of or stored, and it was creating a lot of sickness. People were being dismissed as being hysterical, being crazy, that nothing was really going on, and come to find out something definitely was going on. And this created the first situation involving environmental refugees in US history, because people had to flee their homes. They had to flee the area because of what was going on. And this includes 3 Mile Island, where there was a nuclear meltdown in the state of Pennsylvania that impacted a lot of people and certainly impacted the environment. It seems like the northeastern states here in the US were pretty heavily impacted during this first part of the last Chiron and Taurus transit. And then we also had the Burma Gate oil spill, which happened in the Gulf of Mexico, just off of the coast of Texas near Galveston, which released 10.7 million gallons of oil into the Gulf of Mexico, creating a huge environmental disaster. And so the plus side of these environmental disasters is that they all led to new levels and new layers of environmental regulation to help prevent these types of disasters from happening in the future. This theme of these traumas that impacted not just the earth itself, but the humans who lived there was not specific to the United States. In fact, we had one of the world's worst environmental disasters that killed thousands of people in India at this time in 1984 at the end of this transit. And so this was known as the Bhopal gas tragedy. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. Any of my Indian viewers, please let me know how to actually pronounce that. But this was a very serious situation where toxic gas was leaked from a pesticide plant and killed somewhere between 15,000 and 20,000 people. And it permanently disabled somewhere around 100,000 others. This was absolutely massive and horrific, and it's still to this day one of the worst environmental and industrial disasters that has happened in human history. And so that all said, at the onset of this Chiron and Taurus transit, we are not necessarily on a better path for things to go differently. Especially here in the United States, there have been widespread rollbacks of all sorts of different environmental policies. There has been a massive increase in fracking, which we know is very, very harmful to not just our environment, not just the wildlife that lives here, but to the humans that live anywhere near these fracking sites. And so that is becoming a huge issue. And worldwide, we are dealing with more chemical toxins, more radioactivity, more electromagnetic frequencies that we don't understand their impact on the environment and on human health than we ever had in human history. And so I'm not necessarily looking forward to what Chiron in Taurus has in store for the earth itself, for the land, for the people that live there, for the animals that live there. But what I am looking forward to are opportunities to heal, to do things better. There are a lot of people already working really hard to create better systems, to heal the environment, and I think that's only going to become more and more prevalent as the years go on. Now that we've covered some of the major themes for Chiron and Taurus on both a collective and a personal level, I want to dive into some of the critical dates for this particular Chiron and Taurus transit, because every Chiron and Taurus activation is going to be different from the last due to the configurations that it's going to be making with some of the other outer planets. And so this time around, we have some very interesting things happening. So as I mentioned at the start of this video, Chiron moves into Taurus officially on July 19th of 2026, but this is really only the first taste of that Chiron and Taurus activation. This is a time where we're going to start to see and feel the themes, the energies, the wounds, the awkwardness, the discomfort in our own personal lives, and we're going to start to see some of these themes manifest collectively. But this is only going to last until September 17th of 2026, because Chiron will be retrograding back into the sign of Aries, where it will stay until April 14th of 2027. After April 14th of 2027, Chiron will move forward into the sign of Taurus, and it will stay there for many years until it dips its toes into the sign of Gemini between July 19th of 2033 and October 23rd of 2033. But until that time, we are locked and loaded. We are all in on Chiron and Taurus. And so right out the gate, when Chiron moves into Taurus, it's going to be moving into a square with the great benefic Jupiter in the sign of Leo. This is going to be happening in July. And it's actually going to be forming a loose T-square with Pluto in the sign of Aquarius. Now this square between Chiron and Pluto will not come exact until July of 2028, but this is giving us a preview of what that's going to bring about. It's going to bring us a preview of the very deep, intense psychological crisis, this death and rebirth moment that we are going to be experiencing collectively and also potentially individually in our own personal lives, especially if we have early degree fixed sign planets. Now, to remind you, the fixed signs are Taurus, Leo, Scorpio, and Aquarius. And so if you have any personal planets at the early degrees in those signs, this is the time to look out for. So this period here in July, when we're going to have this sort of looser configuration that also involves Jupiter, this is going to show us the opportunity that will come out of that intensity, the opportunity that will come for us to reinvent ourselves in some way, the opportunity that will come for us to really get in touch with those core wounds on a deep level and do the hard, dark, scary work of healing through it and working through it. And so this is a very critical moment in the Chiron in Taurus story. Now, before Chiron fully squares Pluto on July 9th of 2028, it's going to come into a conjunction with Saturn, which is the great malefic. It is a traditional planet that's associated with hardship, challenge, difficulties, delays. It's also traditionally associated with death, and it's squaring Pluto, which is in modern astrology associated with death. And so these configurations are not existing in isolation. They're not happening separate from one another. I really think summer of 2028 is going to be challenging. I think that collectively, this is when we could see one of those environmental disasters. This is collectively when we could see one of those economic difficulties. Collectively, this is where we could see that we might have to face our deepest fears or our deepest wounds on that very tangible physical material level. Now, exactly what that looks like has yet to be shown, but with Saturn in the mix, Pluto in the mix, Taurus being the sign that is the center of this configuration, and Pluto in Aquarius being a part of this story as well, I wonder if there is not something technological, if there's not something electrical, if there's not something that involves frequencies, if there's not something that involves AI even, that is coming up around this time that is impacting us on an economic level, a physical level, an environmental level, a food scarcity level. There's something big going on here, and I think we're going to start to see a little hint of what that could bring as we come into July of this year, but we're not going to know the full scope of it. Whatever comes is going to be, I think, really powerful, really devastating, and it's going to have widespread implications and influences. We'll probably start feeling it even before June and July, but that's going to be the peak pivotal moment. And so I don't love this energy. And if you're dealing really heavily with Chiron energy in your chart around this time, which we'll get to when we get into the all signs forecast, this is a moment to really pay attention to. This is where things get darker, more difficult. This is where we have that dark night of the soul moment where we really have to get in touch with what we truly desire, where we really have to get in touch with our core essence, where we really have to get in touch with deeper healing in order to move through it. And so this Chiron conjunction to Saturn in June of 2028 is a one-time situation. However, the Chiron square to Pluto is not. This is going to be a 3-year-long energy that comes exact 5 times between 2028 and 2030. Yes, you heard that right. We are dealing with the intensity of the wounded healer squaring Pluto, which is all about psychological depth. It's all about intensity. It's all about extremes. It brings things that are deeply transformative, but it does so by exposing the deep, scary truths that we do not want to look at. Pair that with Chiron, right? Chiron is all about, as we talked about already, it's about our deepest traumas, our wounds, our vulnerability, our shame. I think this is going to be huge on the world stage. I think this is going to be huge for us on a personal level. We're going to be going through this very intense collective evolution where we're all going to have to do some soul searching. And it's going to be as a result of something, I think, external that's going on in our world and in our environment, but it's also going to be impacting all of us on an individual level in a completely different way. And so we'll talk about this as we get into the forecast for all 12 signs. But the exact dates of the Chiron squares to Pluto are July 9th of 2028. It's going to come back around on October 24th of 2028. We'll see it again on June 2nd of 2029, December 9th of 2029. And then the final pass of this will be on April 28th of 2030. Now we're going to be feeling this energy beginning in 2026, and we're not going to completely be out of this energy really until like 2032. That's when we're going to really be kind of through it, and we're going to start to see the healing potential out of it, and we're going to be moving past it and moving on and moving into something else. Now, on a lighter note, we do have one small area of reprieve. We have a single pass of Jupiter in the sign of Scorpio opposing Chiron and Taurus, and this is going to be happening on November 9th of 2029. Now, this is still going to be in a T-square with Pluto, so it's kind of like the experience that we're having in 2026, in the summer of 2026, that is activating this Chiron square to Pluto at its onset at the very beginning is being flipped on its head. And a lot of the opportunity we saw during this time in 2026 that maybe was ripped from us or taken away from us because we were in the muck of it between 2028 and this period here on November 9th of 2029, we start to see the other side of it. We start to see the opportunity that can come as we move out of the situation that we're in during that Chiron Pluto square, that wounded moment, that intensity. Now, one final thing that we need to cover before we move into the Chiron and Taurus forecast for all 12 signs, which I know has been a long one so far, but there's a lot to unpack here, and I really think that this is a critical moment in human history. I think this is a critical moment of healing for a lot of us, and so I really wanted to make sure we unpack this all the way. But for any of you who are watching this who were born between 1977 and 1984, Chiron was likely in Taurus at the time of your birth, which means that you are going through your Chiron return. This happens roughly once every 50 years. It happens around age 50 for every single person. And this is a moment where you are coming full circle when it comes to dealing with your innate Chiron wound, which is a part of your specific Chiron story that is described by the birth chart. Now, this is a time where anything that you have not dealt with, the guilt, the shame, the vulnerability, the insecurity, the awkwardness, that you haven't moved through, you haven't healed through from your past, from especially your early childhood experiences, that might come back around. In fact, it will come back around because it's going to be exposed. It's going to become raw again. It's going to become vulnerable again, because this is the time for you to heal more fully and completely and to understand the lessons of Chiron, so that way you can go about teaching and guiding and healing others. This is a major milestone moment in your life. And so it is hugely important that you understand the very specific individual significations for Chiron in your birth chart, because nothing with this Chiron return can be activated that is not already showing up as a potential in your natal chart. And so I highly recommend, again, checking out Chiron's Key. This is my deep dive workshop into Chiron, and you're going to understand how to unpack your Chiron story. We're going to do a deeper dive into the Chiron return there as well. And so for all of you Chiron return people, this is really an important moment. This is where you're going to really come into your own as a healer, a teacher, or a guide. But this is also a time where things are going to feel more vulnerable. And for your particular Chiron return, for a lot of you, Pluto's in the mix. And so this is not going to be the easiest journey. So definitely stick around, because we're about to get into your forecast for all 12 signs. If you're enjoying this video so far, make sure you like the video and also comment below and let me know what you think is coming up for Chiron and Taurus, both collectively and personally. All right, so let's get into the forecast for all 12 signs. But before we do, I just want to remind you to make sure that you listen to your rising sign, your sun sign, and your moon sign to get a more holistic overview for the energy of the next 7 years ahead while Chiron is in Taurus. Your rising sign will be the most predominant energy, your sun sign will be secondary, and your moon sign is important to listen to as well, although this energy will be more internalized and subjective. If you're unaware of your sun, moon, and rising signs, make sure you download my free Astrology 101 quick reference guide at the link down in the description below before we move on. And even if you do know your sun, moon, and rising signs, this is a great free resource for you to uncover all of the different planetary energies in your chart, all of your planetary placements, so you'll know even more in detail what Chiron in Taurus is going to bring for you personally. All right, so let's get into the forecast for all 12 signs, beginning of course with Aries and Aries rising. For Aries rising, the physical wounds that are tied to Chiron and Taurus for you are going to be very material, very financial. This is about you taking a good hard look at your financial situation, what you need, and whether or not you have what you need, your financial security, and the mindset that goes into creating wealth, creating abundance, and whether or not you have any old wounds, shame, vulnerability, guilt, insecurity, or trauma from your past, especially from your early childhood, that is having a lasting impact on your money mindset, on what you value when it comes to resources. This is also a time where you might feel like you are not enough or you don't have enough. You might feel incomplete or insecure when it comes to your material possessions. And now this doesn't mean that you're gonna lose all your money or something like that. This means that you're gonna be comparing yourself to other people a lot though. And so especially when it comes to your social circle, your friend group, the people that you surround yourself with by choice, you're gonna be comparing comparing what you have to what they have, and you're going to be feeling sometimes inferior, or you're going to be feeling like you don't have enough, you're not giving enough, you're not doing enough. But that's not necessarily true to the reality of the situation. And so this is about taking a look at your psychology around money, your emotional resonance around money, and any trauma around resources or lack of resources that might be holding you back from pursuing the abundance that you truly desire, pursuing the security, the safety, the power, whatever it is, the freedom that money creates for you in your life. But for you especially, because this is Taurus in your second house, I think what you're really looking for here is stability and security on a financial level. And so this is going to bring up any wounds, shame, guilt, or vulnerability around those themes, and especially again in comparison to other people in your life. Or it could even be that there's someone specific in your life that is toxic and that is making you feel bad about yourself because you don't drive that fancy car, or maybe you have the money but you just don't want to, right? And so this is about taking stock of who you're surrounding yourself with over these next 7 years and how that contributes to your financial security, but also your feelings about your financial security. This is a time for deep healing around any material wounds. And so if you had a period of financial insecurity, financial scarcity, especially early on in life, this is where you're going to be coming to terms with that and finally healing through it so you can move on and move forward and maybe serve as a guide for others in this same regard. For Taurus and for Taurus rising, this Chiron transit over the next 7 years is all about you feeling not enough, you feeling like you're potentially inadequate in some way. This is about looking at any wounds, guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity around your identity, around who you are, around what you came here to do, around the way that you show up in the world, even around your appearance. This is where you're going to have to come to terms with where you feel like maybe you're not good enough. And this is going to be a very material thing for a lot of people. You might feel like you need to show off in order to make up for perceived inadequacies that are not truly there. You might feel like you need to have the fanciest thing. You need to be really put together. You need to have the nicest clothes, the nicest hair. You might feel like you need to put on this protective armor when it comes to material possessions that shield you from other people's opinions, that shield you from other people's judgments. And this is a time where you're going to be working on healing through that. However, there is an energy here where something about this is going to be impacting you career-wise, or your career, your public reputation is going to be impacting how you feel about yourself in some way. And a lot of this is because you really need to transform your career into something that you truly and deeply desire. And you're going through this deep process of getting in touch with the mark that you truly and deeply want to make on the world. And there's something awkward about this right now where you feel like maybe you can't measure up or you can't live up to it. There could also be wounds, guilt, shame, vulnerability, and insecurity around your physical appearance that cause you to want to get a makeover, want to, get some sort of expensive surgery even, or procedure done. I would say that this is masking a wound that is very psychological, and, those physical things might not actually give you the results that you desire because of that, right? Because the change that needs to happen here with Chiron, and especially with Pluto being involved, is more internal. This is also a time where there could be wounds around your physical health, and that does not mean that you're going to get sick or anything like that. It just means that if there is anything lingering, or if there's anything chronic, or if you've dealt with health issues in the past, now is a time where that's going to come back around, and you're going to be looking more at the physical roots of those illnesses, but also, again, those psychological and emotional origins that could be tied to the physical expression of illness. And so this is a time also where you might be coming into your own as a healer, and it might feel uncomfortable to you. You might want to serve as a guide for others, but you feel like you are incomplete, you're not good enough, you're not healed enough to do so. I'm here to say that by the end of this transit, you're going to feel differently about that, and that you are going to serve as a teacher or a guide for other people in a very big and important way. For Gemini and Gemini rising, Chiron transiting through the sign of Taurus for the next 7 years is all about bringing up old wounds, vulnerabilities, and insecurities around feeling isolated, feeling separate from other people, feeling like you're different, feeling like you're an alien on this planet. There could be wounds and traumas from the past involving having to do something on your own or be separate from other people. There could be guilt, shame, vulnerability, and insecurity that comes up around not just present life experiences, but there could be stuff that's being dredged up from your previous incarnations, if that's something you subscribe to. And it's something that's like intangible. There's like this unconscious nagging feeling that something is wrong, something is not complete, something is different about you, and that you don't quite fit the mold. This is also looking at spirituality as a form of healing. This is also looking at self-isolation and retreat as a form of healing. Spending time in your own energy can be deeply regenerative, and it can be a very important thing for the soul searching that you're going to need to be doing here. So you're not only going through a deep and powerful transformation when it comes to your beliefs about God, the universe, the world around you, the philosophies that shape your reality through the perspective that it gives you, but it's also about your direct lived experience with your spirituality, with your connection to something bigger and greater than us. And there could be some shame, guilt, vulnerability, or insecurity around maybe not living those experiences, maybe not ever having those lived experiences. This is a time of really deep healing and soul searching when it comes to those core beliefs, but also how you embody them and understand them through that perspective of innate spiritual experience. I would say for a lot of people who have Gemini rising, there's going to be also some guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity that comes up around a deeply held secret. It could be your secret or a secret that you're keeping for somebody else, and this is going to be weighing on you over the course of these next few years. It's a time where you're going to be deciding, should I talk about this openly? Should I share this with the people who it actually involves and it concerns? Should I keep it to myself? This is where there's something that you've been holding on to for many, many, many years, potentially since your childhood, that you really want to get off your chest, but you're not sure if sharing that is a good idea. So it's kind of like wanting to keep it to yourself or wanting to do something with it more privately. I would say healing for Gemini risings over the next 7 years comes through active engagement with your spiritual practice, with spending time in seclusion, with your own energy, with yourself, spending time in meditation, spending time transcending this dimensional reality in whatever way is applicable to you or feels good to you. And also dream work, I think, is going to be really important here, in addition to spiritual study. For Cancer and for Cancer rising, there is a part of you that's always felt like you don't quite fit in with your friends, with your social networks, with society as a whole, that you are different from the people that are in your friend group. And that wound is going to be exposed in a very big way over the next 7 years. This is a time where you're going to have to come to terms with the ways in which you feel that you don't measure up to your peers, the ways in which you don't feel comfortable assimilating with normal society, the ways in which you feel that your friends are different from you and they don't support you, they don't understand you, they don't quite get you. This is also where you're going to be having to go through a big, powerful healing experience when it comes to your connections with your friends, your social networks, your group associations, the people that you surround yourself with by choice. And it could be that you end up feeling isolated or feeling like an outsider as a result of this. There could be a specific situation that comes up that leads you to feel this way, or that leads you to have to kind of estrange yourself from certain social connections and friend groups in order to go in and to heal those wounds that are preventing you from fully connecting with others, because that's really what this is all about. This is about healing that part of yourself that felt like you were not part of the in crowd. This is about healing that part of yourself that felt like you had to prove yourself to your friends, that you had to be someone that you're not in order to fit in. And this is about doing that deep dive. This is also going to be looking at power and control issues and power struggles in certain friendships and friend relationships, and where those social connections are holding power over you through that innate vulnerability and that need to prove yourself worthy to fit in because you feel like you're different or you feel like you're not enough. For Leo and for Leo rising, there are two main sides to this Chiron and Taurus transit for you, Leo, because this is transiting your 10th house, which is the house of career and public reputation. Now, I've seen with some people that this brings some sort of shame or vulnerability or insecurity around your career path, around what you do for work, around your public reputation. It could be that something comes in and your reputation takes a hit, hit. It could be that you were like favored by your boss and now all of a sudden you're not, and that wounds you in some way. But it could also be that you don't feel comfortable with what it is that you're doing. You don't feel complete in the way that you're showing up in the world to make your mark. It could also be that you are coming into your own as a healer. That is something that I see very commonly as Chiron transits the 10th house. You're transitioning from where you're at right now in your career and in your path to embodying this energy of being the guide, the teacher, the healer for people who want to join you along a similar path. This is also a time where your relationships might not mesh well when it comes to work. And so this could mean betrayal. Betrayal in your personal relationships that goes public. This could mean betrayal in your work-related relationships that goes public. Or this could be, for a lot of people, dealing with a past betrayal and learning how to trust again when it comes to people in positions of power and authority, when it comes to the people that you love and that you hold dear, when it comes to business partnerships and work-related partnerships, collaborations, when it comes to putting yourself out there in the world at large. This is inherently an issue of building and rebuilding trust through going in and doing the healing and understanding that the wounds from your past, they're not necessarily applicable to the discomfort that you're feeling right now. Like, you're feeling uncomfortable because of the past, and it's not necessarily conducive to your goals moving forward in the future when it comes to your biggest physical and external ambitions. And so this is about creating something real and tangible when it comes to your career and not feeling like you're enough or that you're not good enough to actually do it, and working through that in order to come out of this much better for it and much more capable as a result. For Virgo and for Virgo rising, Chiron in Taurus is going to be transiting your 9th house, which is the house of your beliefs about God, the universe, the world around you. This is the beliefs that shape your reality through your religious affiliations in childhood and in adulthood. And so for a lot of you, this could be coming to terms with some sort of guilt, shame, vulnerability, insecurity, trauma, or just awkwardness around organized religion that comes from your early upbringing. This could be you having to heal through wounds around your belief systems, wounds around your philosophy, wounds around your knowledge base and your wisdom, feeling like you haven't had enough experience to speak about something when really you should. Coming into your own as a teacher especially, and a guide, is going to be really important, especially if you're guiding people through something really physical, really tangible, really real, because that's going to become very important. It's kind of like you feel like you need to embrace this new path, but you don't know how to incorporate it into your day-to-day life. And there's a need here to transform something about your work, especially on a day-to-day level, to give it deeper meaning. And part of that is going to be coming to terms with this wound and this incomplete feeling around your sense of connection to something bigger than you. And so this is going to be a lot of soul searching around your philosophy, your religious ideologies, and your connection to God, and how you're going to bring that into the work that you do in your day-to-day life so it can have more meaning, it can be more purposeful, it can feel like it's more deeply rooted for you. This could also be that there's a challenge between what you have to do on a day-to-day basis just to get by, just to make a living, and your belief systems. And so this is looking at, hey, I feel like I'm not good enough. I feel like I'm not showing up in the best way. I feel awkward or shameful about what it is that I'm doing every day because it doesn't line up, because it's not in integrity. And so this is a time, if that's the case for you, to look at that, to heal through it, to deal with it in some way, and to turn it into something different, to align yourself with your integrity, with your beliefs, with your connection to something higher than you on that daily level. That's going to really transform your entire life. For Libra and for Libra rising, this Chiron transit through the sign of Taurus could be about coming to terms with the idea of your own mortality. Now, this isn't because you're facing death, but this is because Chiron is transiting the house of death. And so that issue could be on your mind. It could be that you're looking at the bigger questions, the bigger picture. What happens after death? What happens when we're no longer present on this earth? This could also be you just exploring the idea of mortality and life and death in general, and overcoming any vulnerability, any insecurity, any wounds around death from your past and your past experiences. Now, obviously, death is a part of everybody's life because it's the only certainty really in our life, is that all of us will eventually move on. And so this is something that is really important to heal through, especially if you have any lingering trauma around this topic, which many of us do. I would also say, because Pluto is transiting through the 5th house, that, and again, this is a sensitive topic. This is only going to apply to certain people. But if you are somebody who has miscarried or lost a child, there could be wounds or guilt or vulnerabilities or trauma from that experience that could be coming back around for you to heal and work through and work on, so you can serve as a guide for other people. This could also be you just having to look at the deeper issues, because the 8th house is the house of fear. It's the house of your deepest anxieties that are tied to past experiences and traumas that are not necessarily relevant to the present moment, but are controlling you in the present moment. And so this is a time to seek help. This is a time to go and turn inward, to do the deeper work. This is a really great time to engage in therapy. This is a good time to seek out a psychologist or a counselor or some sort of healer that can take you deeper into this. This is also anything involving guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity about power and control issues, especially involving children, if that's applicable to you. This could be looking at anything that's holding you back, fear that's holding you back from truly experiencing joy and connecting with your deepest desires when it comes to the things that bring you pleasure and bring you joy. This could also be looking at any wounds, guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity around your sexuality or around procreation. I would say that not because the 8th house is the house of that. I don't want to, add to that myth, but because this is squaring Pluto in your 5th house. The 5th house is the house of sex and sexuality. The 5th house is the house of reproduction. And so there could be issues around that come up, especially because we're going to have this lingering, ongoing Chiron square to Pluto throughout a large majority of this transit. The 8th house is also the house of debt, taxes, joint finances, and other people's resources. And so there could definitely be some wounds, guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity around money, or around having to rely on other people's money at certain points in your life where maybe you feel fearful that you'll have to do that again, or maybe that is something that's going on right now where you feel like you're dependent on others and it makes you feel like you're not enough or you're not good enough. Just know that that is more psychological than actual material, physical fact. And in the sign of Taurus, it could be that this makes you feel like you don't have the security that you desire because it's not coming through your own hard work, your own volition. You have less control over your resources. And so if that's the case, that's something to work on, to heal through, and to fix in a very material way. But this could also be something that's just deeply psychological. Like maybe that's not really the case, but you feel that way. Maybe there is this part of you that feels ashamed that you're relying on somebody else or that you're getting money from outside sources. And that's something that you need to work on healing through, because it's not a shameful thing. Everybody does it at some point or another. And most people are not only getting money through their own work, right? The majority of Americans, for example, are in debt. So you're not alone in that, right? A lot of people rely on their spouses, their significant others, other people in their life, inheritance, insurance, welfare even, to help them get by. And so that's not necessarily something that's shameful. And so it's kind of looking at things in a different perspective and working on healing through any issues that you have involving resources on that level. There could also be some sort of weird shame, guilt, vulnerability around maybe you have investments or you have money and you want to be more generous and you haven't been, and maybe it's because you're holding on to it because it's very Taurus, right? You're accumulating and hoarding resources and putting them into all these different investments in different places, and you're realizing maybe you need to live it up a little and kind of utilize it in some way, or you want to actually do something and give back. For Scorpio and Scorpio rising, Chiron's transit through your 7th house is all about dealing with old wounds, vulnerabilities, insecurities, awkwardness, and shame around relationships. And so anything from your relationship past is fair game to be dredged up during this transit. You could find that old partnerships, relationships from your past are coming back around, that they're showing up in your life, that you're bumping into them somewhere crazy and it feels really awkward, it feels really uncomfortable. But if that happens, it's because there's some part of that connection, there's something about that relationship that needs to be healed, that needs to be worked through in order to move forward and have better, more healthy connections in the future. This is also, if you are somebody who's partnered, it could be that your partner is going through some sort of healing crisis or healing process and it feels uncomfortable, maybe for the both of you. So this is where you might have to show up to help facilitate healing for somebody that you're very close with over the course of these next 7 years. Because the 7th house is not you necessarily. The 7th house is your partner. The 7th house is the person you're married to. The 7th house is the people that you're close to in your life. It's those very close one-to-one relationships. And those people in your life might be having this Chiron healing moment. They might be going through some sort of financial or physical instability. And you might be showing up to support them in some way, to help them in some way, to guide them in that healing process in some way. This could also be a really important time of healing through family trauma and wounds and vulnerabilities and insecurities and awkwardness in important family relationships. And this is because most of this transit is going to be happening in square with Pluto in your 4th house, which is the house of home, family. It's also the house of property and real estate. And there could be some sort of wound or insecurity or difficulty that comes up around your very literal home, property, living situation that feels insecure, that feels unstable, or that you feel like guilty about or shameful about, or it feels vulnerable to you in some way. It's kind of like you're craving this stability and security in this contract, in this agreement, in this living situation, in this relationship. And that stability and security doesn't feel certain, and so it's like you feel insecure about the situation, even if the physical material reality doesn't reflect that instability that you're feeling internally, if that makes sense. This is also a time where you might be healing through guilt or shame around your ancestry or around your lineage or your family dynamic in some way. This is definitely a major time of healing through family trauma, generational trauma, ancestral trauma, because of that connection between Chiron in your 7th house and Pluto in your 4th house. And finally, on the wounded side of Chiron in your 7th house, I would say that there could be some sort of healing that needs to happen around death, potentially the death of a family member, the death of a loved one. It is something that could occur in the next 7 years. I mean, that's a long span of time, but it could also just be that there was someone you lost who you cared about, who you were connected to in the past, who was like part of your family. And now you're having to kind of go back and revisit that. Old wounds are being dredged up and you realize that you never mourned properly, you never finished that cycle of grief. And now is a time where it's coming full circle and you're going to be able to heal, move on, and turn it into something really powerful where you can guide other people through that process. This is not only an incredible time for healing within your partnerships, but this is also a time where you might start working more one-on-one with people in this sort of healing capacity, because the 7th house is the house of your clients. And so if you are somebody who, works in a healing industry, or even if you don't, in the next 7 years, you might find yourself serving as some sort of guide or teacher or healer where you're working one-to-one with people in that way. Or this could be reflected in your partner coming into his or her own as a healer. And again, you being a part of that support system. Sagittarius and Sagittarius rising. This Chiron transit through the sign of Taurus is happening in your 6th house, which is the house of health, work, and daily routines. This could be you going through a deep healing process on a very physical level, looking at where you feel like you don't measure up physically, where you don't measure up when it comes to your health. It could be looking at any guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity around the work that you're doing or not doing, your ability to show up in service or not show up in service, depending on the limitations and restrictions that are imposed upon you from the outside. This could also be you looking at any sort of feeling of inadequacy or feeling like you're incomplete when it comes to your knowledge base, your education, your intelligence, that might be preventing you from actually doing the work that you need to do. It's kind of like, I don't feel good enough. I don't feel like I have enough knowledge. I need to go and get another degree, another certification, another online course, watch another video, another podcast, right? Read 10 more books before I can actually take action. That's definitely not the case. This is a psychological blockage for you. And this is a time where you're going to overcome that. You're going to get rid of that imposter syndrome, and you're going to be able to go in and actually do the work. This could also be a very literal physical healing for you, where if you are somebody who has chronic or lingering health issues, you're going to get to the bottom of it. You're going to be going through this process of healing over the next 7 years of your life, where you're going to be finding the right healers. You're going to be connecting with the right people. There could be moments of intensity, moments of really big, powerful healing that knock you kind of out of sorts, but there could also be a gentleness to it that is woven in throughout, where things are lining up and you're finding the right person. This could also be you going into a career path that involves healing. It could be involving healing the body. It could be involving working with food and nutrition. It could involve healing the earth in some way. I think that's very applicable to certain people. There's a very literal energy here of you doing something to heal others and to show up in service of either the planet or other people in your life. This is also an energy where there could be some sort of health issues that are coming up involving animals or pets, because that is a 6th house topic. It could also be that your pets are a source of healing. And so there's kind of this energy here where the best teachers and the best healers in your life for you over the next 6 years are your animal friends. And that can be a really beautiful thing. For Capricorn and Capricorn rising, this is an interesting one because Chiron is transiting your 5th house, which is the house of pleasure. It's the house of joy. It's the house of fun. And this could be a wound that you're dealing with around literally pleasure, joy, and fun. Like, do you feel guilty when you go out and do something that's enjoyable for you, that's just for you? Do you feel guilty when you engage in something pleasurable? Do you feel guilty when you do a hobby or engage with your passion? Do you feel guilty like you should, be doing something to make money and monetize your passions instead of just going out and doing something because it's for you? This is what you're going to be looking at with Chiron transiting the sign of Taurus in a big way, especially that financial piece, because this is squaring Pluto in the 2nd house. It's kind of like, well, if I'm not making money doing it, if it doesn't have a physical reward, then I shouldn't be doing it. That is absolutely not the case. That is a mental and psychological and emotional blockage that stems from some sort of past experience or trauma, potentially brought over from your parents or your upbringing, that you're going to be dealing with, looking at, working through. This could also be guilt, shame, vulnerability, or feeling inadequate in the bedroom. And so the 5th house is the house of sex and sexuality. And if you have any lingering wounds, any lingering insecurities on that level, that is going to come up in a big way. And you're going to be working on healing through it. And so this is going to be a big healing process when it comes to your romantic life as well. This is also any guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity that you're holding on to involving past trauma, potentially even with your children. And so it's almost as if you feel like, I don't want to pass along the same traumas. I don't want to pass along the same wounds. I don't want to make my kids feel inadequate in the same way that I felt. And so there's going to be a lot of processing around that as well. And definitely there's a financial component to this too. So it's almost like for some of you, like, I don't want my children to feel that lack that I felt. I don't want my children to feel like they stand out because they don't have the nice clothes or, the nice thing or whatever it is. That could be a big part of it for a lot of people too. There could also be a shame or vulnerability that comes up for you around maybe choosing not to have children. Maybe you never thought too much about it in the past, but now all of a sudden it becomes this thing where, people are questioning you and you're having to stand up for yourself, and it's making you feel awkward or like you're different in some way. That could be a big thing for some Capricorn people as well. I would say for the most part though, this is about taking what you love and just doing it. Right? Not caring if it makes money, not caring if it makes financial sense. Doing something very physical and tangible that you enjoy, that feels pleasurable, and learning how to do that guilt-free. That's going to be a big component of this transit for you. For Aquarius and Aquarius rising, this Chiron and Taurus transit is all about healing through deeper family wounds. This is about looking at guilt, shame, vulnerability, or insecurity that stems from early childhood experiences, any guilt or shame or difficulty in your relationship with your family, especially your parents. This is where you're going to be going through that healing process. This is where you're going to be processing those experiences so you can move forward and have a much better connection with your family. This is also about looking at guilt, shame, vulnerability, insecurity, awkwardness, or feeling like you're not good enough when it comes to your home, your property, your living situation. Do you feel ashamed of the place where you live? Do you feel proud of it, right? That's going to be coming into question because this Taurus energy is all about the physical manifestation, what you actually own, what your roots look like, what your home environment looks like on a physical, tangible level. Do you feel satisfied? Do you feel safe in your own environment? Do you feel like you have the stability that you need in order to thrive where you're living in the here and now? If that's not the case, this is going to come up and this is going to become a source of healing and transformation for you. Right now, you're going through a deep, powerful transformation in general because we have Pluto transiting your first house, which is all about getting in touch with what you truly and deeply need, want, and desire at a core level for yourself. This is about figuring out who you are and shedding any excess that is not that. And so all pretense is just, going away. And so this is a part of that too. This is like looking at how your environment, how your roots, how your family dynamic and connections shape who you are out in the world and what you can do, what you can give, who you get to actually be, what you get to draw in and manifest, what you get to actually put out there into the world. And so looking at the foundations of your reality through what you were brought up with, the traumas that were passed on to you through your parents, through your lineage, through the intergenerational dynamics in your family, and healing through that. That is going to be the most powerful thing that occurs during this time. Now, there could be some sort of healing for certain people around instability when it comes to your place of living. So if you were ever homeless, or if you ever faced eviction, or if your family struggled when it comes to their living situation early on and you felt like you were different than the other kids, you felt like you didn't really know what was going to happen next and you didn't have that security that you really crave on that level because you have Taurus in your fourth house, this is going to come up for you. Not in that it'll be reflected in your current reality, but in that things will come up that will trigger that and you'll have to work on it. You'll have to work through it. You'll have to recognize it and heal it. For Pisces and for Pisces rising, the Chiron and Taurus transit is happening in your third house. This is about looking at wounds, vulnerability, insecurity, and perceived inadequacies when it comes to your knowledge, when it comes to your education, when it comes to your intelligence even. Because the third house is the house of your learned skills, especially basic skills like reading, writing, and arithmetic. This could also be looking at past wounds, trauma, vulnerability, insecurity around your early education or not feeling like you fit in with your peers. For some of you, you might have had some sort of early childhood difficulty. You might have had like a learning difficulty. You might have had ADHD or dyslexia or a speech impediment or something along those lines that made you feel inadequate or different when you were younger. And so this is going to come back up in a really important way where it's going to be triggered, like that feeling, that sensation of not being smart enough, not knowing enough, not being able to do what the other kids are doing, standing out amongst your peers in that way. That's going to come up and that's going to be a source of healing where you're going to need to heal through that. This is also a time where you could have some very vulnerable conversations coming up over the next 7 years, I would say. Some very deep, some very intense, some very vulnerable conversations that are going to be deeply healing for you and your relationships with other people. It could also be that if you have siblings, they are going through some sort of healing crisis or healing process, and you are serving as a means of support to help them through whatever it is that they are going through. This is also just you feeling like you never know enough. You have to keep studying. You have to keep doing it. You need more knowledge to prove that you are worthy, to prove that you're ideas are worthy. And that's not necessarily the case. And so this is something to work on healing through over these next 7 years. Definitely if you have a strained relationship, I would say, with people in your community, your neighbors, your town, you know, whatever it is, the HOA in your town, this is a time where that might come up too, and you might have to go through a healing process, like on a smaller level with that. This could also be if you have a sibling or extended family member that you have issues with, this could be a really important time where you're going to need to heal through that in that relationship. And so let's say that you have a sibling who's estranged or who you're not very close to and you feel guilty about that situation. Now's the time to face it head on, because those deeper conversations, that deeper healing can happen. All right, everybody, that is my forecast for all 12 signs. If you enjoyed this video, if you got something out of it, make sure you like it, subscribe to my channel, and share this with a friend who you feel like could benefit from the information I shared with you today. Also, don't forget to check out my Chiron's Key workshop, which is 50% off all through June of 2026. And thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed this one, you'll enjoy whatever's floating around up here. And I will see you in the next one. Bye, everyone.